Hello all, good morning, good evening or good afternoon. Before I start this and explain why you are seeing this slide again, let me take a moment and thank everyone. As I guess most of you know that I'm re-awarded as an MVP for the 11th time, and that's all because of you. That's all because of your questions, that all because of your suggestions that we continue writing these blogs or recording these YouTube videos. So thank you for that, and I'll try to continue doing as per your wishes or as you command onto it. Okay, coming back to this. Yes, we did a series of consumption of these APIs in Business Central with no authentication, and we did them in parts: get, post, put, patch, and delete. But then thank you again for the comments that I chose a kind of a website which is going away, which have a sunset date announced on their website. So I wanted to redo this video, but not this time again doing it in a series, so that it takes a lot of time doing all of them together, because we have already discussed about different parameters, how you do this and all. So in this particular video I have again tried to find a different website, hopefully that stays for a longer time, but we'll be using this website called RESTful API. These are real REST API which can handle HTTP requests 24/7 for free, so you can use it for demo purposes, for your testing and learning. So hopefully we'll try to do all these in today's video, and this might be a little bit longer, but stay with me. So what we'll be doing, we'll be doing all of it. We'll be doing a get, we'll be doing specific gets if you want to get two objects, in this case 3 objects, 3, 5 and 10. If you want to get a single object, then how you do it, we might do one of these all 3 are gets. Then we'll surely see how you post it, then we'll see how you put it, which is an update process, and then we'll see how you patch it, which is you only specifically updating a part, and then how you do a delete object. Hopefully this will cover everything. And the other mistake that I did, and I'm culprit for that I did not provide the link for the GitHub for this discussion. So all the code that we'll be doing today or we have done in past will be available in this GitHub repo. The link will be in the pinned comment, so don't worry about it. I might keep modifying that code as we go through this process, so stay with me. If it is getting a little bit confusing, you can always go back into commits and see when what was changed. Okay, but I'm going to do everything from the beginning. No, I've done some pre-work which is pretty simple business NLPs, so we'll get to that. Let's understand what it is to begin with. So when you do a get, you can do all object gets, and then you just need to call this, and if everything goes well, you'll get a response code of 200. When you do this, there can be different kind of objects. The whole set is, as we talked in the previous video, is a part of an array, and then inside array there's an object, and inside the object there is a sub object. So this is the main object, and then inside this there is this data section. Now interestingly, this link have quite a few interesting data set. If you look at the ID 2, there is no data set available, which is the child data set, and then in the third one there is again a data set. So what we are going to do is we are going to deal with, let's say, getting these objects, which is reading these objects, and see how that works. And then when we read them, we'll put it into a table, and because it's a header line relationship, this part gets into a header table and this part gets into a child table, like your sales order or purchase order thing. So we'll see what happens. There are 13 records in this, and we'll try to get them first. So let's focus on the get part. But before we get into it, let me open my VS Code and show you the changes that I have committed yet. Don't worry, they're not big. As we saw the design of the API documentation for this particular URL that we are going to consume, we saw that there is a need of a header which will store the ID and the name. and then there is a line which will share the ID for Business Central purposes. And then, because if you look at it, and let me open that link again, because in the data these parameters are not static. In this case it's color and capacity, in some cases it's price and color, in some cases it's color and capacity, or anything else. So to make it generic, what I have done here is, in this table the primary key is ID, which is the primary key of the header, and the line number. And then there are two fields, one which hold the parameter value and the another which will hold the value associated with that parameter. So you can create any kind of child relationship in the object, and that will get stored into this table. So this is the primary key of the table. Anytime a record gets inserted, it just automatically generates a line number like any other Business Central logic. So these are the two table part of the design, and then there is a function to delete lines when the header is deleted, and an action to delete everything. Associated to these pages, there are tables, there are some pages. The first one is a list page, which just lists down the ID and name. And then this page opens up a card page, which have the ID and the name, and the lines fast tab, which is a subform which contains the detail of parameters and value. So simple enough, I guess. Okay, there is already an object. I don't see an object, but let me see. Okay, it just says that, but I don't see it. Okay, it says it's already existing with 50,003. So maybe I have 50,003 somewhere, 50,002, 50,004, 50,003. No, I don't have, but okay. So this becomes a subform that is there. And then to execute all these APIs, what I've done is I've created an API handler page, which let you execute actions like get, post, patch, put, and delete. And all these are calling a code unit called REST API management, like we had before, which have all these functions. And we'll write the definition of these functions. This is just a skeleton of that code unit. Okay, so let's run it and let's see how this page look like from where we'll be running it. Okay, so this should get published here, and we should be able to see how it looks. First, we'll try to achieve the get process. We'll see how you can get the data, and then this page will help us to execute different actions, because this just lists down all those actions. I guess a lot of introduction part of it, I know. So here is the link that you provide, which will be called by these actions, and this is the page where you will be able to see the output of what happened, which is that page, the list page associated with it, the page number 50,004. This will show us whenever we create an object or whenever we get an object and things like that. Okay, so this is right now empty. Okay, and this is the reference for you if you need it for future, and I'll change it to the website link. Right now it's pointing to the objects link, which will show you the object. My mistake. Okay, let's focus on the get. Can we get the records? So let's come back here and let's get into our code unit, and let's try to write the get logic. So the first thing that I have already done is I have checked that the URL have value, and because these are global variable that we use even the last time, content, response, method, boolean of response status, and we'll see what that means, and response text. So let's try to get the record. So from the page, when you click the action to get, this method gets called get record, and it passes the URL that needed to be processed for the getting of records. So first, what we have to do is we have to make a request. So let's try writing make request, and in the request we'll surely pass the URL which is needed, and we'll pass the HTTP method of, not this, of type get, we did talk about this enum in the previous video. If you haven't seen them, I guess go ahead and watch it. And then we would also like to get the response from it. So we'll use the response status to see what happens when this response was made. So this will return me the response status, which is a boolean, and in turn of this, when the request is made, I would like to get the response message back from it, or we'll think about it. So let's come in here, let's create a procedure. So we have the URL to access, we have the method of get, and then we also have the status. So now what we are going to do is we are going to write the similar code that we have written in the past videos in here. Okay, so the first thing is to set the content of the request that we are making. So let's see, do I have the variable? I have the HTTP content variable available here, so I can just live with it. So the first thing is to get whatever the default headers are using this, and then they are returned on something called as headers. Okay, so let's name it as content header. This will return me whatever the default headers that has been set for this by default. So let me create this as HTTP headers. Sorry. So this will get the HTTP content header that is by default defined. Now I may or may not need it, so I'll just clear this. So content header, okay, you want an S, okay, let's use S. Alright, so I can then do a clear of it. The clear will remove everything that came by default. This method will get whatever is set by the default and will save it into the header, and then this one will clear the content of it because we don't want it. We may want to have the content header set as per our need, which is that we are interacting with this API, which is in language of application/JSON. So this will set the header based on our need. The next thing that comes into picture when you are trying to talk to an API is the request. Now we need to make the request and we need to set the content of it. So let's define the request. We don't have a request variable, so let's set this up. Request as equals to HTTP. Okay, it should be HTTP request message. So this is what we are going to build, the message that we will be sending to our API. Now let's see how you make the request. The request is made with, you need to pass the content, and we just set the content here, so we can just pass the content as it is. So anything that is in the content will pass into the content section, and then we need also to define certain other parameter into it. Let's see what those are. We don't need cookies, we don't need headers, we need to okay, set, oh, we need to set the request URI, which is which URL we want to access. So the URL that is being passed from the actual request will be passed to this. So now it knows that the request is being made with this content, and it is going to this particular URL. Now the other thing that we have to do is set the request dot method as in which kind of request it is. Now which kind of request is defined by HTTP method, so we can just pass the HTTP method into it. Hopefully it needs, the only way is to set it via new method text. So we need to make that request. So we'll be doing different kind of requests. So let's create a case statement. Okay, case of HTTP method. Oh, sorry. Is HTTP method of, and here we can define different HTTP methods that we have. So I can say HTTP method of type get will set the, and my ChatGPT is not every time correct, so I'll have to manually correct it, and I can pass request dot method as get. I have other options available which I'll be using in future. So, and hopefully ChatGPT now understands the pattern, and people who are using ChatGPT will surely understand that how kind of ChatGPT understand what you're doing. But I've said the get, post, put, patch, and then we also want to do delete. So let's see, delete, and that says the request method to delete. So based on this, let's review it here. I've got the header, I've cleared the header, and I've said that my header is only that I'm interacting with application JSON. If in your scenario you have other headers parameter, you can just append them into your HTTP headers. Then the content is passed here, which is set here, and then the set request URI defines where to go, as in which URL to call. And then based on the different HTTP method, it understands what kind of request is being made. Now everything is done. So now I'm good to kind of send it to my client, and it is not here, so maybe I'll have to define here. Okay, client is equals to my HTTP client. I can just do a client dot okay, send. Now when you do send, you need to define the request, and then in response you will get a response. So I can surely set the request because I have defined the request here. So it goes my request, and then in return I need a response. Now my response would be HTTP response, so I'll just need to define that. So this is my request message, and this is my HTTP response message. So let's look at it again. Whenever you send the request, you need to pass what is your request, which we have baked in here, and then this will return me the response, and it will also return me a boolean that did this call made it through. So if you remember, we did pass the response status here, and that response status we would like to kind of get it from here. So I can just then pass this as where, so that it can go back to my calling function, and then I can just append it here. So whatever the response is, either true or false, so that my calling function can handle it, and then get responses based on it can be done from here. Okay, so typically this should do majority of the thing, but then once the responses come and the responses here, am I getting it back? Not exactly. So let's remove it from here, the variable, and attach it to as a response to this call. So whenever this call is made, it responds the HTTP response message. So whatever the response will come will go back to my calling function, which in this case right now is just the get part. So now what I can do is I can set the response, and hopefully there is a response, HTTP response, yes. So I can just go up into the get and say whenever this is made, get me the response. So I'm saying call this URL, and then everything is written there, and I'm trying to utilize the get method, and whatever response status, which is a boolean that you get, let me know what happened, is it successful or not. and then also give me the whole response. Now once I have the response, what I have to do, I just have to parse this response into a text as we did last time. So I can do a response message and I can get the content of it, and then I can read it, and we have talked about it, so I'm going a little bit fast, but you can read it on a secret, or you can read it on a text, or you can read it into a stream. So I'm going to read it on a text. So once the response is being read, I can then go ahead and process response, whatever I want to do with it, right? If you want to see it on the screen, you can do it from there. If you want to save it into a table, you will do it, we'll do it there. So let's add this process response, and for now, without wasting more further time into it, let's see is the response is being even generated or not. Okay, and I should have been sending the text over here. So because this is already read here, so I can just pass it here, and then I should be able to create this method at this point. No copilot at this moment, please. Oh yeah, so the response text becomes my okay, response text is my text. So I can just show it on a screen what the output looks like, and then we'll see how you process it. As in, we can surely process it right now, but at least let's do step by step to see, can we even see the response that is coming out of it? Is it the definition of our function which is making the call, is it correct or not? We might be wrong. So let's just verify what happens when we try to do a get call with this. Okay, so we have everything set. Let's do a get call. It's going, and here's the response. So I did got a response, ID, name, Google Pixel, data, color, everything, and from here to capacity 256 GB, which should be the last item. Yes. So I'm getting everything which is here into my response text. Now I need to process this and store it into a table so that my users can see it. This is the whole idea of it, right? So let's try to process the response. Now this is a little bit typical or tough, not so tough, but structure than what we have processed in the last one. Everything, and let's see the response here. Everything that is coming up is a part of an array, or if you made this call, because the get can be different, right? So if I made this call to get 7, then I'll get only one object. So your user might get an object, or it might get the whole set, or they have an option to get selected by responses by filtering the records that they want with the IDs. So in the first and the second case, you will get an array returned. In the third one, you will get an object return. So first, while we are reading this response, we need to explain to the code that it need to check is the response that is received, is it an object or is it an array? Because if it is an array, there's a different way how you process it. If it is an object, then there's a different way to process it. So let's see. So when you're processing response, let's do one more thing so that it remains as it is for all the functions. I can also pass the HTTP method here, and there is a reason why I'm passing this, so we'll see that in a while. HTTP response method will create the procedure, and for now we'll say if or case of, we had created that case somewhere, right? Okay, in make request. So let's do this, just copy this Okay, and do end. Okay, okay, it should be okay now. Okay, write record in database based on response text. Okay, so let me create another function, or maybe should I take it to a separate code unit for the processing part, because that's what we need, right? So let me create a code unit, separate code unit altogether. Okay, which is SDH API data management, and we'll finish this, and this will have the function to write records in database. So I'll define this code unit here. Okay, variable SDH data mgmt after code unit data management, and I'll just utilize this into write records in the database. Okay, so let me define it here. Okay, okay, now I need to define this method, and I'm getting the response text, so let's create a procedure there. Here we are. Okay, write records in data then. So we have the response that has been generated from here, and we know that we need to process it. So first thing that we need to understand or identify, is this an object or not? And what we can do is to check, we'll have to load that text into an JSON, either object or an array. So let's create two variables. We'll call one as rest JSON object, which becomes my JSON object. Okay, and then we'll create the rest JSON array, which becomes my JSON array, because either of these can be part of it. Now what I can do is I can load the rest JSON object with doing a read from, as we did in the previous videos, with the response text. The read from returns me a boolean which tells me is it read or not, and it'll only read it if it is an object. So what I can do is I can say is object as a boolean. Now I can say is object. Okay, after boolean. So this will confirm that is it a boolean or an array, because if it is not read here, then I need to process it into an array. So if not is object, then I'm very sure to do rest JSON array dot read from this. Now just to be double safe, and I can be wrong, but I just want to also check if not, if it is not even an array, which is impossible, then generate an error message, invalid JSON format. But at this point I'll know is it an object or is it an array, because if it is an object, then the data will be loaded into this. If it is an array, then the data will be loaded into this. So let's do the next part, which is if it is an object, then I need to read the object. Okay, otherwise if it reaching this point, then means it's then read the array. As simple as that. So let's create the read the object first, because that's pretty simple. We know what the object look like, so we just need to read that particular object. Okay, so now what happens when there is an object? Let's copy that here. so that we know what it is, what it looks like. This is the object. It's a little bit multi-level object, so I'll just place it here. Okay, so that we can refer this while we are utilizing this or writing this. Okay, here is the object that it look like. It starts with this, which is an object, and then these are these two parameters. So the first thing that we need to do is read the header parameters in this case. So we'll say the read JSON object, if you can get from it what we want to get. Okay, sorry, sometimes Copilot goes a little bit funky. Okay, rest JSON object, okay, dot get, and we know the factor for it, which is ID. So this will get the ID, but the get always returns you into a token, JSON token. So let's define that JSON token, and we'll call it as result token. So whatever comes in the ID will get into this. So I'll get 7 into it, and then I can get that ID and store it into a variable of the supported data type. So this will be integer, it seems. So I'll just do a response ID of type integer, and then what I can do is I can get the value of response ID from my result token. Okay, result token dot as value dot as integer, because I know it's 7, so it'll be typically a number. So this will format that into an integer and then store it here. In the same way, and just copy paste this, I'll get the second thing, which is name. So I can get the second parameter, which is name. I can store it into the response name, and my response name become a text, and then I'll format it as text. So far so good. So I got the ID hopefully, and I got the name at this point. Now I need to write these two values into my header table. So what I'll do, let's call a function here, which is write header in database, and I'll pass my response ID and response name. So let's pass this in, and let's create a procedure which will then create a record into table SDH, and I don't remember the table name. Okay, SDH rest no auth header to record SDH rest no auth header. Okay, this will just directly get into this table and will start writing this, right? And that's what we want, that this header gets written into that table. Hopefully the response ID has a value, but there's no harm on checking it. If response ID is equals to 0, then exit. I don't want any errors at this point. Exit. And if my SDH response authentication header dot get response ID, then also exit, because that already existed, that means. Otherwise I'll do a SDH header dot init and SDH header dot ID is equals to response ID, and SDH response header dot name is equals to response name, and dot insert as true. Okay, so this will read my header part, which is this. Hopefully that is sorted out. Now we need to figure out about the line section, because I also have this data section. So now I need to read this object, which is my rest JSON object, dot get, and what I'm getting the data. The data will also be returned into a result token. So that's how the get response. If result token, it is supposed to be an object, hopefully. If it is an object, I can check that. Then I have to get this object into an object. Okay, so let's create a JSON object, which we don't have, so we'll call it as sub rest JSON object. Now what I'll do is I'll get whatever is into the token into this object. Okay, so I got the object from the token, and then I have stored it into my this thing. Now the beauty is that the data can have multiple number of things. There can be 5 parameters to it. There can be 1 parameter. There can be 0 parameters to it. That we also need to remember, that there might be 0 objects into it. And if there is 0 object, then if there is 0 object, then this will come here and this might error out. But what I can do is I'm getting as a boolean, so I can just check if it gets the data, because if there is 0, it might not have that data. Okay, so if it finds the data object, and then inside this, if the data object is an object, then whatever that object is, which is this piece, I'm saying load it into the sub JSON object. But now the sub JSON object, as per the response that I'm seeing here, is not static. It can have 2, it can have 5, it can have different attributes. So I don't know how many attributes are here, so I can't do a direct get of color or capacity, because there is a capacity and a capacity GB. There is price, there is color, and there can be n number of parameters attached to it. So what I need to do is I need to do it in a little bit different way than we were doing till now for the header part. So let's see what options we have in the sub JSON object. We have add, we are not adding it. Token, clone, contains, that's just equivalent to get. There is keys. Okay, it gives you set of keys to that JSON object. Now these keys will list down how many, and the key value combination is how many keys are here, and so you will get 1 2 3 4 keys here if there are 4 keys attached to it, and you will get all these key name as year, price, CPU model, hard disk, and there can be different keys, and it will get you different keys from it. Other than this, there is nothing else. There is a values, which is the values that are stored in here. So you can either do a get, or you can either get the values and the keys from here. So let's try to get the keys from it. So when I do a keys, it returns me a list of text. Okay, so if I call this, I'll need to define a list of text. So let's define that. Let's call it as parameters keys as a list of text. Now this gets value from this. Now what this will return you? It'll return you year, price, CPU model, and hard disk size. All these keys will be returned to it, not the values. Okay, so now there are 2 ways to do it. There is, if you remember, there is also a function associated with it or method associated with the the object, JSON object, which returns you the value. That'll give you this. So either you can also read the values, but because I know the key, I can also do a get now. And because there are 4, I might have 5 and all, I'll have to run a counter. So let's do a I, which is an integer, to do a count. And let's do a for loop of I beginning from 1 to my parameter key, because this is a property of the list of doing a count. So using the list.count, you can actually get the count of records that are part of it. So now I'm looping through this item or this key, these keys, one by one. Now what I can do is I can surely get from my sub JSON object, and I can do a get of what? I can get the key, and I need to get it. So from the list you can get the value at a particular index. So I'm saying the index 1, next time index 2, index 3, index 4, and so on and so forth, and the response of that get will come into result token. So now I have year in parameter key get 1, and the result token will store the value 2019. In the same way, next time it will be price in this part and 1849.99 in the result token. So I can now get both. So what I can do now is I can write line in database. This time I'll pass it the primary key, which is my response ID, the value which is in the key ID, and the result that I'm getting. But the result in this case is either a text or integer. In my table it's always a text, so I can parse this as value dot as text. So then now I have the parameter and the value part of it sorted out. So what I can do is I can create this method, and I'm already getting the response ID, which is part of the primary key, and then I can just directly write it into the database. Let's do this again. If the response ID is blank, go ahead, I don't mind it, get out. And then I also need to do the get thing, which will happen from my SDH REST no auth line, and I'm going to do a get of it, or not a get, but I can't do a get because there are 3 parts of the primary key, the 2 part of the primary key which I don't know about the number. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to do a SDH record line dot set range of my ID with the response ID that I'm getting, and then I need to set and look for the parameter, which right now set to get, but that is weird. Okay, I need to change this to parameter and this to okay, let's change it to value. Oh yeah, if I get this parameter, then I'm going to ignore this. If not, SDH rest no auth line is empty, which is the performance optimized way of doing it, then you can exit this. Okay, so if the parameter already exists, then I don't want it to be created again. Last thing last, or first thing first, and the last thing last for sure, I need to start defining the field. I'll keep the line number 0, parameter, value, and insert true. Now the reason why I kept it 0 is, if you remember, on the line table I have the method that if the line number is 0, it'll automatically get the next possible line for that particular ID and will assign it to that particular record. So this will write my record into the line. So I have the header written and I have the line written based on the scenario that I wanted, and this will write my object into the database. Okay, let's remove this. This is nice. Okay. Okay, just for my sanity, I'll just clear them out, because if they are moving into a loop, it kind of get overloaded or overwritten. So let's do at the beginning, clear my response ID and then clear my response name. Okay. So this will load my or read the object. Oh, but because we did a lot, we forgot about read the array, because there is another situation where it can be an array, and if it is an object, then you read it as an object. But if it is not an object, then what you do is where we are. So what happens when you have it as an array? Let's figure that out. Let's create a procedure and let's keep it next to read the object, so that it's easier for you later when you are referring this code, if you are referring this code. Okay, now it is an array. How you traverse between an array is, if you remember it in the last session, you first know that it is an array, and then inside that array there are different objects. So eventually it's a collection of objects. What we need to do is we need to go one object by object inside the array and then try to process them. As simple as that. So let's come back in here. If it's the array, then what do you do? Okay, so you have the JSON array available with you. You can get a token out of it. So you can do a REST JSON token of type JSON token, and then using our for each loop, because anytime you read it, it'll store that into the token. So now this will come into my token, and this will traverse the loop throughout. So what I want to do, whenever I get one item from the array, the item from that array will be stored into the JSON token. I need to get that token, because let me go back. What is inside each, whenever you are traversing, you are getting into a token. What is this token? This token is actually an object. So I need to store this, whatever is coming in, into a JSON object. So let's say REST JSON object. Now this object gets assigned from my JSON token as an object. Now once I have the object, what I'm actually doing is reading the object. So what I can do is I can call read the sorry, my bad. I can call the read the object and pass my object. An array is a collection of objects. What I'm doing is I'm traversing for each object inside the array and then writing it into the token, converting that token to an object, and then calling the same method, which is read the object, which eventually will go into the same loop and start writing it into the header and the line section. So with this, it'll be able to write that data back into my table. So here, when I'm doing a get, I'm saying go ahead and write that data into my table, which will complete the writing part of it and which will write that record into the header and the line table. We might not do it for every response type because that would make it so long, but I just wanted to explain that even if it is a complex object, not super complex to be very fair. You can still read it if you start thinking it from that perspective. So what we are doing right now is we are trying to read that object and then store or collection of objects into one of the table. So let's first try when it is an object, which is this. So I'll use this as an URL. I'll just paste it here. Okay, and before I go in here, let's open this also, where the records will be written, so we'll be able to see is the record actually written or not. So this page is currently empty. Let's go ahead and do a get. If everything goes well, I should be able to refresh this page and there should be one record of number 7. If there is a record of number 7, that means everything is going well and the response is getting stored into the table. The ID and the name is here. The parameter that were associated with number 7 are stored in my line table. Okay, so we have done this. Let's try a endpoint which have 2 or 3 objects. What was that example? This one. So let me copy this link and then paste it in here to see what happens. It should return me 3, 5 and 10 when I do a get. So let's do a get. Okay, I did a get and let's come here. Okay, let's refresh this window and I should see 3 objects which were listed based on the response that was being generated from the API that is consuming it. Okay, I'm still trying to figure it out. Okay, let's see. Let's open this again because the page kind of disconnected at this point, but the page should load and it should have 3 records at that point as per the response or the request that we have made. One with 2, one with 2 parameters, third one is also with 2 parameters. I'm just going to delete all. Okay, and now I'm going to call the all object thing this time. Okay, and let's do a get. If everything goes well, this should return me a total of 13 objects with different data item, the second one being null. So that means there is no parameters combination associated with my second object. I got 13. The first one has 2 parameters, the second ones have none. So far and so forth, third and fourth and all. So we have successfully and easily done with the get request. Now it's going a little bit long. Should I complete others into a separate video? I wanted to do all of them together, but it'll be a pretty long video otherwise. So let's break for today, and then sorry for the title, but what I'll do is in the next video we'll do all of these, because we'll not get into details of how you process that response, because delete is just deleting that record, so there's nothing much happens there. Put and patch, yes, there is an update that's happening, but we don't need to write it into Business Central. If you have to, you now understand how you have to. In the same way, we'll see the post. Let me know into the comment section. Does that make sense? What we have talked about today? Is it still confusing? Are there any parts that doesn't make sense? And then in the next one, sorry for that, we'll surely cover the post, put, patch and delete, all of these together. Till then, keep learning and keep sharing. I'll see you sooner than later on the next part, most probably tomorrow or day after tomorrow, and we'll complete this chapter all together. One more request, if you're still here. If you want to talk about basic authentication, drop a comment saying basic authentication, and I'll surely make a video about basic authentication. If you have websites which support basic authentication in their APIs, please share those links with me. Otherwise, I'm planning to do it on PC on-prem if you guys need it. Okay, so till then, have a great day, keep learning and keep sharing. See you sooner than later. Thanks.